Good morning. Today we are doing Poetry Lesson 8, Poetic Devices, Part 1, Extension. Please remember the champs if you are using the computer. You are expected to keep your volume level at 0, raise your hand and wait if you need help, work independently on the assignment, stay in your seat, and work independently. Today for the lesson you will need the handout on the screen right here, as well as something to write with. If you do not have those materials, please pause the film and go ahead and get what you need. If you are ready to move on, let's always make sure that we're starting by writing our name, the date, and the English period on your paper. I would hate for you to have to turn this in and not be prepared. So mine is now ready to go, and let's start by reading the objective. Today I am annotating a poem for Poetic Devices so that I can become a more critical reader of poetry. I will know I have met the objective when I can respond to a poem by writing a paragraph with at least 5 sentences that uses images that appeal to 4 out of the 5 senses. So I'm thinking about what we're doing today, and I know I'll be working with poems, and I know that this is important because we have our poetry final coming up on Thursday and Friday of this week. I'm going to think about what it is, the power verb that I'm doing. The action that I'll be working on today is annotating, and I am annotating a poem. It is also important to know that when I prove that I've learned what I'm doing, I will be writing a paragraph with at least 5 sentences that use 4 out of the 5 senses. So that's what I'll be looking for doing at the end of class. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and rate the objective. Since this is new material, I would probably rate this a 2 or a 3, but yours is up to you. Go ahead and rate your objective now. Okay? Now what we'll do is make our corrections to the following sentence. Our directions read, use editing marks to revise the following sentence. Then, write the corrected sentence on the lines below. Waiting for Miss Antonsen to finish talking, she just stood there patiently. Go ahead and make your corrections and be prepared to check them in a moment. All right, go ahead and compare the corrections that you made with the corrections that are correct. I see that I've capitalized the W because it is the first word of the sentence. The word waiting was spelled incorrectly. Miss is a title and therefore should be capitalized, and it is an abbreviation, so we put the punctuation mark of the period to stand for that. Then we have Antonsen as a proper noun because it is a name, so that is capitalized. We put this comma here after waiting for Miss Antonsen to finish talking because this is what is called a dependent clause. So we'll put the comma to separate the dependent from the independent clause. And then we have the period at the end. Once you've made your corrections, please make sure that you write your complete sentence on the lines here. It should have all of the proper corrections. Now let's look at question number 3. This line was written by Robert Browning. The years at the spring. We want to think about which of these was also written by the same poet. A, this I set down as positive truth. B, and days at the morn. C, raise the song of harvest home. Or D, like a dog he hunts in dreams. Go ahead and answer this question, and when you're ready to move on, resume the video. Okay, let's review your answer. I would say that the answer is B. And this stands out to me because the pattern of this really parallels this first sentence. If they say the years at the spring and days at the morn, he's identifying both of the places, the time of the year or the time of the day, and its location. So it's almost as if he's personifying the day and the year. And I don't see that same parallel structure in any of the other answer choices. If you're able to explain this on your own, please answer this question, how you knew that this line was also written by Robert Browning. Go ahead and do that, and then when you're ready to move on, resume the video. Good job. Now let's look at question number 4. Answer the following prompt by writing a Power 1 sentence. What do football and soccer have in common? Okay, so let's think about turning this into a complete sentence. I'm going to go ahead and answer that question. Remember that you're looking for a Power 1 sentence. So this is not necessarily a complete sentence in the same way where we are going to explain. We're setting up ourselves to be able to write a full paragraph. Go ahead and answer question number 4, and then resume the video when you're ready to move on. Let's take a look at the overview for our lesson for today. This is very similar to what we were working with yesterday. Starting with literary analysis, let's read along as I read out loud. Poets use word sounds to create pictures and feelings in a poem. Rhyme is one sound device that poets use. Words that rhyme have the same ending sound. Fin, bin, and tin rhyme. The chart below shows 3 other sound devices. Look for examples of each sound device as you read parade. Here are our sound devices. I see onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like what it means. For example, clashing, buzz, whir. Alliteration is the repetition. The beginning sounds of a word are repeated, such as spick and span. They both start with that S sound. Then we have repetition. This is when words or phrases are used several times, such as with blare, with bleeding, with roar. Here I see this repetition of the phrase with right before the sound that is being made. Now let's read this next part. Reading strategy. Reading according to punctuation. When you read a poem, pay attention to the punctuation marks. Do not automatically pause or stop at the end of every line. In a poem, commas, periods, and other punctuation marks tell you when you should pause or stop, just as they do in a story. Read the following tips. Comma is pause. Semicolon, long pause. Period, full stop. We're going to read parade several times using the punctuation as a guide. Let's go ahead and turn the page and look at that poem. Okay, here's that poem Parade by Rachel Field. It says, this poem shows the excitement of a parade. The poet names the sounds and sights of a parade in town. Before reading this poem, I'm looking at the poem itself for the different punctuation marks so that I can be sure that when I read it out loud, I stop when I know I'm supposed to stop. Please mark your poem for punctuation marks just as I have done. When you're ready to resume, go ahead and press play again. Okay, one other step I'm going to take before I read the poem out loud is to check out the vocabulary words so I know that I will understand more of this poem. I know that there will be words I don't understand because they're underlined here, and I can find the definitions at the bottom in the vocabulary development section. Here it says blare is a loud sound. Brass are instruments made of yellow metal. Cymbals are brass plates that are banged together to create a sound. Gilded is when it's coated with a thin layer of gold. Cockades are ribbons or other decorations. Leisurely is in an unhurried or relaxed way. Let's go ahead and read this poem now. I'll read it out loud this first time, and you just follow along. This is the day the circus comes, with blare of brass, with beating drums, and clashing cymbals, and with roar of wild beasts never heard before within town limits. Spick and span will shine each gilded cage and van, cockades at every horse's head will nod, and riders dressed in red or blue trot by. There will be floats in shapes like dragons, thrones, and boats, and clowns on stilts, freaks big and small, till leisurely and last of all, camels and elephants will pass beneath our elms along our grass. All right, this is a pretty cool poem. We're going to read it one more time. This time I'd like you to whisper read the poem along with me. This means that while I read out loud, you will be whispering along. This will help you practice reading a poem fluently. Make sure that you stop at the punctuation marks. When you whisper read, it's very important that you whisper so that you don't interrupt other people. You don't need to be embarrassed if you're whispering because most people shouldn't be able to hear you. So go ahead, let's begin reading Parade by Rachel Field. Remember that you're reading along with me in a whispering tone. This is the day the circus comes, with blare of brass, with beating drums, and clashing cymbals, and with roar of wild beasts never heard before, within town limits. Spick and span will shine each gilded cage and van, cockades at every horse's head will nod, and riders dressed in red or blue trot by. There will be floats in shapes like dragons, thrones, and boats, and clowns on stilts, freaks big and small, till leisurely and last of all, camels and elephants will pass beneath our elms along our grass. If you struggled with reading along with me, if perhaps I went too fast, go ahead and read it aloud once more. If you need to rewind for me to read it with you, go ahead and do so. If you're ready to move on, let's take a look at the literary analysis questions in the margin. First, we see circle the words in line 2 that show an example of alliteration. What sound is repeated? So each of these different lines is what is called a line. So I look at line 2, here's line 1, here's line 2, and I'm going to look for words that are alliteration. I remember that alliteration is the repetition of the same beginning sounds. So I'm going to look for words that have the same beginning sounds, with blare of brass with beating drums. So what 2 words show alliteration in this line? Go ahead and circle them. Now, write the sound that is repeated. I know what it is. Do you? Let's move on to the second question. Here it says to circle each punctuation mark in the bracketed text. Then read the lines aloud using the punctuation as a guide. How many times did you come to a full stop? Okay, we started reading this earlier, and we read this with that punctuation. I don't necessarily see a bracketed section for us to work with, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through this whole poem instead and answer this question. How many times did you come to a full stop? So I'm looking for how many times there was a period. Go ahead and count how many times there were periods and write the answer here. Now we'll move on to the reading check. What parade sites are described in lines 10 through 14? List 4 different sites below. So I'm looking for things that you can see at the poem. This, I remember, is imagery. So I'm looking specifically at lines 10 through 14. They've already marked line 10 for me. This is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they're basically talking about this end part of the poem. So I'm going to look through here and find 4 different things that you could see at the parade. Find those 4 things and add them to this list. When you're ready to move on, press restart. Now, we'll stop to reflect. The poem describes what you see and hear at the parade. What might you smell and taste at a parade? This is for you to think on your own. So go ahead and answer this question. What would you smell and what would you taste at a parade? Go ahead and answer this question. And when you're ready to move on, go ahead and turn the page. If you're ready to move on, we'll be looking at this page that says Review and Assess. But in order for us to complete the lesson, we'll continue by answering these first. We will continue by moving on to part 2 of the lesson. Please click on the link on your computer that will take you to part 2.